Today is October the 12th, 2016. My name is John Rodriguez, a volunteer with the Hanford branch of the Kings County Library Volunteer History Project. Would you please state your name?
My name is Jack Schwartz, Jack William Schwartz.
And where are you from, Jack?
I was born in San Francisco in 1915.
1915. And what did your parents do for a living?
My father had a barber shop in the Ferry Building in San Francisco. My mother never did have to work. My father died when I was only 10 years old. And we moved from San Francisco to Los Angeles because my mother had sisters down there.
And do you have any siblings?
I have a sister, an older sister, yeah.
And what is her age?
She died at 84, a long time ago now.
Mm-hmm. And it was just the one sister you had? What did you do before serving?
Well, starting when? Out of school or what? I graduated from Caltech in 1935 and got a master's degree in civil engineering in 1936. I had various jobs for a year or two. I worked for the California Division of Highways. I worked for the California Division of Architecture. I worked for the Army Engineers on the flood control in the Los Angeles River. And then I volunteered into the Navy in 1940.
And you enlisted, correct?
No, I volunteered. I had to take an examination, but I started out as a lieutenant junior grade in the Navy, which in some ways I had absolutely no military training at all. All of a sudden I was a JG.
And what year was that?
Pardon?
What year was that?
1940.
1940. And what inspired your choice of branch?
Say that again.
What inspired you to join the Navy?
Well, there was no doubt in my mind that we were going to go to war. And I saw this ad in some magazine, engineering magazine, saying the Navy was looking for qualified engineers. So I applied, took an examination, got selected. Thought that was better than being a GI.
Yeah. And where were you stationed?
My first station was in Pearl Harbor in 1940. And then I got transferred to Guam in 1941. And that's where I was when the war started in December 41. And Guam was undefended, and Japanese took over 2 days after the war started. We were all POWs.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I got caught.
That's how you got caught. Well, let's go back just a little bit. Let's talk about the boot camp experience.
About what?
Boot camp.
I never had boot camp. I had never had 1 day of Navy training in all 22 years, which made it difficult, really.
Yeah, you just got thrown into the deep end.
Exactly. Never had boot camp, never had officer training. Had to learn all by myself.
Well, let's talk about your adjusting to that military life. How was the adjustment?
What do you mean?
What stood out in your mind that was different from civilian life?
Well, obviously it was different.
Right, but any particular?
Well, as an example, when I was assigned to Hawaii in the first place, it was not an order, it was a question. Would you accept duty in Pearl Harbor? I didn't have to. And actually I looked into it some, It said Pearl Harbor in the 14th Naval District. And I wasn't stupid. I looked around, knew about Guam and the Philippines. They were not in the 14th Naval District. So I said, sure, fine. I didn't know, having known the experience, that once I was in, they could do whatever they wanted.
Mm-hmm.
So that was my first mistake, which changed my whole life.
Of course. Of course.
And out in Guam, Guam was, I don't know the proper word, it wasn't backwards, but there were more ox carts than there were automobiles. That's how prevalent it was.
Yes.
It was very enjoyable. Weather was nice, work was easy, interesting. Biggest thing we were doing was building a big breakwater for Apra Harbor, which of course is still there, and it made it a very good harbor. The ships would stop there on the way to the Philippines and stuff.
What did you like to do when you were on leave?
Pardon?
When you were on leave, what did you like to do?
I never was on leave before I got captured.
Oh. So it was constant work.
That's right. Never had any vacation.
Was there any specialized training?
Like I said, I had no training at all.
Oh, wow.
Had to learn the hard way.
And your assignment was how close was your assignment to the fighting?
Say that again.
How close was your assignment to the fighting?
Well, I was on Guam. There wasn't any fighting. Guam had about 100 Marines. They had some World War I machine guns. That was about it.
Mm.
And the Japanese landed 5,000 troops. And the governor surrendered, which he was supposed to do. There was never any intention of defending it. So when he surrendered, of course we surrendered. The Japanese kept us there for a full month, and then we were taken to Japan, which is a separate story.
Would you like to speak about that?
Well, yes, in fact, I was just researching it the other day. We were taken to Japan on a ship called the Argentina Maru, which was actually a luxury liner. We didn't have luxury accommodations. They put us down the hold. We were stacked 5 high and kept down there. We got out an hour a day and given very little to eat. But compared to what other POWs went through, like the Philippines, it took us 6 days to get to Japan. I had friends in prison camp who on board ships 62 days. If you can imagine that, I can't, but they lived through it. So I wouldn't say I was lucky, but compared to other POWs, I had an easy time, really. And we landed in Japan in January of '42 in a snowstorm in our tropical uniforms, which was no fun. But I've said many times, I had to be a POW, I was a lucky one. What do you want to go on from there or what?
Yeah, you can. This is your story.
Well, should I tell you about being a POW?
Sure.
Well, actually, the people from Guam were the first Japanese prisoners who arrived there, and they quickly separated out the officers got better treatment than the enlisted men, let's face it. Although in Sensuji, where we were, I never witnessed any terrible treatment.
Mm-hmm.
But in September of that year, for some unknown reason, the 3 civil engineers from Guam and a bunch of enlisted men were sent to Kawasaki, which is on Tokyo Bay. It's a big work area. And turned out they wanted the enlisted men because they were all mechanics, and they wanted them to work in the factories. But they didn't know what to do with the officers. In fact, they said in writing that they made a mistake. They would send us back. Well, it didn't happen right away. So I was up there in Kawasaki for 2 years in 2 different camps. I was only a JG, but I was a senior American there. So presumably I ran the camp. Actually, I had no authority. If something went wrong, they blamed it on me. So I got an occasional beating, but nothing real serious. I mean, I was beat up a lot. I got knocked down, that's about it. And out of the 3 civil engineers that were there, one got sent back a year later, and I got sent back and sent 2 years later. But here again, I was lucky because had I stayed there, I probably would have been killed because the one officer that did stay there got killed by American bombs because they were bombing Japan in July of '45. They hit the camp, a bunch of guys got killed. So I'm a lucky guy. In a way.
In a way, yeah, in a matter of speed. Yes. Well, this may be a silly question, but how would you say that these experiences affected your life?
Well, obviously, if you've been in a prison camp 4 years, it changes your life.
Right.
We went back, and I had to leave for quite a while, and got promotions, which I would have had I not been captured. So all of a sudden, from having 1 year experience as a Lieutenant JG, suddenly I'm a commander, still with no training. So life was not easy for me. And my first duty was in Long Beach, and I stayed there for about 2 years. And it took me about 2 years to become normal again, I think, because I would still get upset by things. I was married, but not very happily, so we'll skip that.
Sure.
And after 2 years in Long Beach, I got transferred to Cocos Holo in the Panama Canal Zone, which was probably the easiest and most fun I've ever had in the service. I mean, it was a good job. I had a lot to do, but we also had a lot of time off. And I learned how to play golf. I learned how to bowl. It was a very pleasant assignment. And I stayed there for 2 years. The Korean War started, but it didn't affect Panama. And then I got reassigned to Seattle, Washington, to a very good job as Assistant Director of Public Works for the whole Naval District. And this Seattle was very pleasant duty. That's where I got divorced from my wife finally. I should have been sooner, but you know. And fortunately, we had no children. And in Seattle, I really enjoyed it up there. Got used to living in the snow after living in Panama.
Yeah, oh yeah.
And that's where I finally got a divorce. And then was transferred down to Key West, Florida. That's as far as you can go in the United States. And I drove the whole thing. I drove 5,800 miles between duty stations.
Wow, that's a good...
I could have been shorter, but it took time. Visited my folks in Los Angeles and stuff.
Yeah.
Drove across the country. And landed in Key West, which also was great duty. And there I was the public works director of the naval base there. And after a short time, I met a young lady that I liked, got married again, which I swore I wouldn't do, but I did. And in fact, Key West was the happiest years of my life. I had a son there, you have the name there, and had wonderful duty. And there again, I got another good job. I got very good assignments in the Navy. I did not make captain, which is a separate story, and I don't blame them because let's face it, I never had any naval training. I had to learn everything the hard way.
Yeah.
And they kept giving me good assignments. So my next was a beauty. I went to Commander-in-Chief of the U.S. forces in Europe, just outside of Paris. My wife had a fever for a week, but she was so excited. And we all went to Europe, and that was before they flew there.
Yes.
We went on the America, which is, at the time was a fancy ship. Now it would be considered that way. Mm. And it got to Paris, and I expected I would retire in 20 years because I hadn't made captain, but I didn't have to retire. And why retire when you have the best duty you can get? So finally I got transferred back again to Albuquerque, New Mexico, which was also good. Let me back up a little bit. Many times I tried to go to schools. There were different schools being offered. Never did I get assigned to a school. And let's, for instance, when I got to Albuquerque, I was assigned as project officer on a nuclear test job. Okay, the guy who I was relieving had gone to a year of special school for that. Mm-hmm. The guy who was my assistant had gone to a special school for that. The guy that relieved me had gone to the school. I didn't go to the school. So that's been the one bitter thing about the Navy. They should have and could have sent me to a different school. Anyhow, I decided to retire because there's nothing left for me in the Navy. And I saw this. Well, while I was in Long Beach, I took the examinations for civil engineer for the state of California. So I was a licensed engineer in California and kept that up, paid my yearly dues and stuff. Mm-hmm. So I decided a year I looked for a job in California as engineer, and saw this ad for an engineer for Hanford. Applied for it, got it. Been in Hanford ever since. So that's the story of my life.
Let's talk about your military friendships.
About what?
Your military friendships. Your some of the people that you met while you were active duty.
Well, actually, I didn't. Any close friends never did. I'm not a friendly guy. I mean, I like people, but I don't know. Some people make friends right away. I don't. I had acquaintances, but I can't say I ever had a military friend.
Were you awarded any medals or citations?
Yeah, it's funny. I got the Purple Heart. And I didn't apply for the Purple Heart because I was never wounded. But in prison camp, the one I told you about was there for 2 years. There was an English Navy doctor who was also a POW, and he and I were good friends. And he got a bit beat up more than I did because he tried to keep people from going to work and they beat him up. Mm. And apparently he wrote to the Navy Department and told them about the problems I had there. All of a sudden I found myself as a Purple Heart. Sometimes it's embarrassing, I don't know. But I got the medal. And the only other medal I got was years later they decided to give medals to ex-POWs, which I don't know why, but they did. So I have those too. I don't know what I'm talking about.
Do you remember where you were the day you heard that the war had ended?
Yes, I sure do. Like I say, I was back in San Susie, but had been sent back there. At that time, it was an all-officers camp, except for a few enlisted men doing the cooking and stuff. And we had officers there from Britain, from the Dutch officers from Java, Australian officers, and before the war ended, the Japanese, for some reason, decided to follow the Geneva Convention, which they had never signed. And they broke up the camp had such a different nationalities, separate camps. So I was sent to one called Roku Roshi, which Roku is 6. So Roku Roshi meant 6 hills. It was way on the western coast of Honshu. It was about 6,000 feet elevation. And if the war had ended, we would have frozen probably.
Oh.
But it did end. And Roku Roshi, they didn't make us work except to grow our own vegetables and stuff. But it was probably the most crowded camp. If you can imagine it, 22 inches per person. That's where you lived and slept.
22 inches.
You wouldn't have fit in 22 inches.
No, not at all.
Of course, you would have been thinner at the time.
Right.
And the war was over on August 14th, but we weren't found by the military until September the 8th, which is about 3 weeks later. And a B-52 flew way up, we could see it, and they spotted us because we had POW on the roof. And a couple hours later, they were dropping food on us. And a couple of days after that, a military group came to us by truck. And the first thing they did was spray us completely, head and foot, inside out, with DDT.
To decontaminate you.
Which we all had bed bugs and fleas and lice. They don't use that anymore, but it killed all that stuff. And after a few days, they took us by truck to a railroad station, then to Yokohama. And we stayed in Yokohama overnight, and they divided us up by Army, Navy, Marines. And the people who had come from Guam were flown back to Guam, of all places. So all these years later, we got back to Guam. And who did we meet on Guam? One of the nurses who was captured with us. I forgot to mention, but when the nurses were captured, they took them to Japan, but they sent them home after a few months when the ambassador was sent home. They didn't want the Navy nurses there. And who was there but one of the Navy nurses? She was in charge of the hospital. So strange things happen, don't they?
Yeah.
And we stayed on Guam for about, I forget, 2 or 3 weeks, and then went by ship back to the States. So all in all, I left the States in September of 40, got back in October of 45. A long time. Now you're caught up.
And how was adjustment, or readjustment, I should say, to civilian life?
Well, we went over that at the beginning. I told you how I got back into the service again.
Yeah.
So you have all that.
What was the reception at home?
Not very good, really. I remember being said, "Oh, you guys sat around in prison. Yeah, well, we fought the war." That's the reception we got. We were treated rather poorly, really, considering what we'd gone through.
Not very pleasant.
Huh?
Not very pleasant.
Not at all. Not at all.
And you said after you were done with after you were discharged and done with your military service, you went into, you became a civil engineer?
Yeah, I became, after I retired, I became public structure and civil engineer here in Hanford in 1962, stayed until 1980. Then I was 65, I thought, well, how much longer can I live? I better retire and enjoy it. I didn't know I'd live to be over 100 or I wouldn't have retired, but I did, so, and I've kept very active here in Hanford. I've been on a lot of commissions. I was on the planning commission for 8 years. I've been on other commissions. And even right now, I'm on the Park and Recreation Commission. I was on the grand jury for 5 different years. You have to keep active.
Yeah.
And I want to tell you, I have a book that I want to show you.
Sure.
Are you taking pictures of this?
Point it right to the camera right there. And that says Points of View, a journalistic history of World War II in the Pacific.
Yeah. I found out while I was, sometime after I got back. In fact, I knew for a fact that all through the war, this is strange, the Japanese printed English newspapers all through the war. Who read them, I have no idea. But the prisoners got copies now and then, and we could tell what was going on. So after many years, I decided, well, I'm going to look into this. And the librarian, who isn't there anymore, helped me by getting, what do you call those tapes? That
Microfilm? Microfilm?
Microfilms. And the librarian got me microfilms, God knows from where, from different libraries. And I spent literally thousands of hours going through microfilms, copying what the Japanese said right from the very beginning. And it's all in here, very edited. Altogether it took, well, I don't know how many thousand pages of stuff. And then I said, well, I'll compare it. What do the Japanese say? What do the Americans say about the same thing?
Mm-hmm.
Which, believe me, we're not the same thing.
Right.
And I'm rather proud of this. But I tried publishing it. Nobody wanted to. So all I got out of it was the work I did.
Well, but they're your words.
I enjoyed it thoroughly, and it passed the time. And if you want a copy, I have it on a tape there. You can have that.
Oh, thank you.
I don't want to give you this as my last
Oh,
copy.
no. Now, did you continued your education after your discharge? Correct.
No, I already had a master's degree,
So you didn't.
and I certainly wasn't going for any more. And I went to probably one of the best colleges in the country, Caltech is.
In Los Angeles.
Pasadena, yeah. So I served my time.
Are you involved in any military ceremonies?
Any what?
Military ceremonies like
Organizations.
organizations or parades or?
Well, I'm a member of the Fresno chapter of the POWs. We meet once a month in Fresno. We're down to a very few members left now. At one time there were over 180 members, and now we're down to, I think, 9 still living. I'm the oldest. And as far as going, as long as I could, I would go out on Decoration Day to the Armona Cemetery. They always had a very good ceremony there. I can't make it anymore. And that's about it. The Columbus has a very dedicated group of veterans, and they have a very nice Veterans Hall in Columbus. And about once a year they have a ceremony there for POWs. In fact, they had one just last month. So I do what I can.
Right, to make it out there. How would you say your experiences have affected your outlook on the military?
Well, right now, everybody in the service now is a volunteer. And I feel awfully sorry for the guys that are in Iraq and Afghanistan. In fact, I still have no idea why we were sent there. I know about Saddam. So when we got rid of Saddam, who was actually a bastard, all right, but they're worse off now than they were before, I think. And they're still fighting among themselves. I think we should never have gotten involved with them. And while we're been getting out slowly, we're still not out. And I know now we're accepting refugees from Syria and stuff like that. I don't think we have to worry about the whole world, frankly. Let them stew in their own juice, in my opinion. but apparently it's not our policy.
Right.
So I don't agree with our policy at all.
So you'd rather we worry about our own
Let
yard.
them worry about themselves. I mean, we're worried about the whole world. I don't know why.
Well, future generations will see this interview. Future generations are going to see this interview.
Can't hear you.
Future generations are going to see your interview here. What would you like to tell them? What would you like that you haven't already said?
I stay away from that.
Okay. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
Not really. I still feel upset that this didn't get published. I tried quite hard, couldn't. But anyhow, it'll go to the Library of Congress where nobody will ever look at it.
You never know.
You never know.
You never know. Well, Mr. Schwartz, thank you so much for taking time for this interview.
Well,
And
I'm glad it finally happened.
Yeah.
I've known Sherman for years. He's always been very helpful for me.
and above all, thank you for your service to this
Okay, thank
country.
you. Remember the flight when we flew over to Japan, April 42, the bombing?
Mm.
Well, if you look at that and read what's in there, of course, the Japanese said that they bombed us, which they were bombed. All we hit was hospitals and schools, naturally.
Right.
But the interesting thing is, the American newspapers did not even mention the Doolittle raid, except a quote from Buenos Aires. Nothing came out from Washington until after Doolittle got back. So actually, they acted like it didn't happen. They were quoting Buenos Aires, saying, according to them, we bombed them. That was one of the great things going on.
Yeah.
I remember what happened there. We didn't get bombed, but Kobe did. We didn't see it or hear it. But that same day, that we didn't know why, I was down at Senchuji, the Japanese broke out their sprinkler system, for their fire suppression system. They had a cart with the hoses on it, and they had a motor. The motor wouldn't start. Some of our Navy enlistment started the motor for them. They started it, the hose leaked all over the place. They weren't prepared for that at all.
Oh.
They were caught short. So, and later on we found out about the bombing. It was one of the fun times we had. 2 years ago, the Japanese started a program about 7 or 8 years ago, calling it the Friendship. They invited ex-POWs and an escort to go to Japan for 5 days, all at their expense, all first class. And my son and I took them up on it. We went to Tokyo. We flew out of San Francisco first class. You would think they'd fly us on a Japanese airplane, but they didn't. We went on United and landed in Japan early in the evening. Went to a actually real first-rate hotel. And this is sort of funny. It was about 10 o'clock at night. We hadn't eaten for a long time. And they said we'd have a bite to eat. But I had to go to the John. Well, I don't know if you've never seen Japanese what they call benjos. The benjo is just a hole in the floor, and you squat, and you do your things. So here I'm in Japan in a hotel. No fancy bathroom. I sit down, guess what? The toilet seat is warm. I had to laugh. Everything was... So then we had a fight to eat. Then for the next 4 days, we met the Japanese minister, what's his name, Obi? Is it Obi?
I am not sure.
It's something like that.
Yeah.
And they took us to different places. The Japanese newspapers followed us all around. There were 14 of us, 7 POWs and 7 escorts. Both said they were sons. One was a wife. Two were wives. And we went to Yokohama. We went to Kyushu, which it had never been bombed. And we were questioned by Japanese newspapers. We were interviewed by the Washington Post, and that picture was taken by the Washington Post. There was some of us. We were, I think, in Yokohama. And we had decided, my son and I, that why be so close to Japan and not see more? So we extended on our own. I wanted to go to see Hiroshima, which I think they should have included on the trip, but they didn't. So he and I went to Hiroshima, and we spent 2 days there. We went to the museum there, which is worth saying, where we saw all what the bomb did. Right now it's a beautiful city of 1 million people. You never could tell anything had ever happened there. And at the museum, I think he and I were the only white people there. The Japanese were visiting. And there were whole teachers taking school children there. And I figured, boy, they're going to hate me, look at me. Nothing but friendship. So the Japanese downplayed the war because they lost it. They don't want to admit it, but so they practically don't mention it. So that was a good experience, really. We're back.
Okay. And when was this again, Jack? When did you take this
It
trip?
was October 2 years ago.
Okay.
And they're still doing it. They've taken 7 at a time since then. But they're running out of people now.
Mm. Yeah.
So that was nice of them, but they call it the friendship trip. They never did actually apologize for starting the war. But at least they treated us as friends. You know, the Japanese admiral who did all the planning for bombing Pearl Harbor, he knew English. He had been in the States at the Japanese embassy for years, and he was quoted later as saying, the biggest mistake we made was bombing Pearl Harbor, because he said he knew we'd come back, and we did. Anyhow, bye-bye.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Jack.
That's me on the right.